We're good to start. Okay. I think we're on the record.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 25th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission of Montclair. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and by sending a copy to the Montclair Times, the Star Ledger, and the Herald News. And just noted that we are being streamed live on Channel 34 on the Montclair television station. So, Mr. Petto, roll call?
Sure. Chair Bennett?
Here.
Vice Chair Hyman?
Present.
Mr. Greenbaum?
Here.
Mr. Rooney?
Here.
Ms. Kane-Levy is absent this evening. Mr. Reimnitz?
Here.
And Mr. Karasik?
Yeah.
And Mr. Connolly?
Here.
Thank you. The first order of business, we are going to review committee appointments for the coming year. We haven't done this because we didn't have a full complement of commissioners for the few prior months. So, Graham, can you just tell us the Design Review and Redevelopment Committee?
Sure. That currently consists of Mr. Greenbaum and Ms. Kane-Levy.
Mr. Greenbaum, do you want to continue on that committee?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Committee. Can we appoint Caroline to it if she's not here? Okay. I think I spoke to her. She was interested.
Yeah, I believe at the February meeting we discussed, and I think for the most part everybody was on board
With
continuing their
Okay.
existing roles.
Okay. I'd just like to go over it though. Education and outreach is Steve Rooney and
That's Steve Rooney and Ms. Bennett.
Okay.
Correct.
And landmark nomination.
Is Mr. Rooney and Mr. Reimnitz.
Okay.
Okay.
Minor application.
Myself
Currently
and-
is Mr. Hyman and Ms. Kane-Levy.
Okay. And the revisions committee.
I have Ms. Bennett and Mr. Reimnitz.
Great. Okay, thank you. And the next order of business is the approval of the minutes from March 28th. Does anyone have any corrections or comments? No?
No.
Okay. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And one,
He's not there and I'm not here.
Reimnitz
Okay.
and Rooney are.
okay, 2 abstentions. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment tonight under public comment? No? Okay. The committee reports, just to bring everybody up to date. Education and outreach, the Pine Street Histories is still going on, the collaboration between Montclair State, the Montclair History Center, and the Montclair Historic Preservation Committee. It's an ongoing program, research program about different aspects of Pine Street. Researching Your Home, we had another workshop at the Montclair Public Library. Again, it was overly attended. And unfortunately, Ann Lonigan is leaving her position, but the library is hiring a new member who will be a local history member who will be there on Wednesday. So we hope to start that again. Can we have an upgrade on our grant, Graham? That
Yes, we have received the executed grant from the state. So the certified local government grant and aid that was issued to the township in 2018 has been executed. The township is proceeding to issuing the RFP, the request for proposals, pursuant to the grant agreement to conduct a cultural resource survey of the Wheeler Street and Oakcroft neighborhoods. The RFP will be published tomorrow in the Star Ledger and also posted on the township website tomorrow.
And that's tomorrow, the 26th?
The 26th, correct.
Okay, the Star Ledger and
the
public.
closing date for submissions is May 16th.
Right, that's important. Thank you, Graham.
Mhm.
Do we have do we have a minor applications committee report?
I think we just met once since our last meeting. We reviewed those.
Right,
It was Ms. Bennett and Ms. Kane Levy.
right.
We
I
reviewed
was
3
gonna-
applications.
Okay. We'll review them later on. We do have a new committee, the Bylaws Committee, which is going to be looking at a change in the bylaws and also an application
And procedures.
procedures, and that's meeting tomorrow at 1:30.
Correct.
And that's myself, Ms. Kane Levy, and Mr. Conley.
Correct.
Okay. Right. Old business? There's none. So our first application is, the first application is a referral from the Board of Adjustment. Application 261811 at 11 Fidelity Place. It's a bulk variance of the required front yard setback for a new porch in the R2 two-family zone. We are looking at it because it is in the Label Street Working Housing Potential Historic Area, Resource Area, which is listed in the HPC element for the master plan. And just give me a minute. The project description, this is project descriptions. The applicant proposes to construct a new entry porch on the front facade of the dwelling atop an existing concrete landing entry. The proposed porch will be 12 feet 8 inches in width and extend about 5.5 feet from the front of the dwelling. Porch will be accessed by a new entry stair and landing, which we're going to look at tonight. And the historic significance of this is that it is the property, the subject property is located within the Label Street Working Housing Area, potential historic area identified in the 2016 Historic Preservation Plan element of the master plan. Plan element describes the Label Street Worker Housing Area as follows. The Label Street Worker Housing Area contains several properties on Friendship Place, Fidelity Place, and Oak Place that were once used as worker housing for the nearby Crump Label factory near Label Street in the 19th century. So what we're looking at, as I described, is a porch, a construction of a new porch onto the existing facade. The applicant is requesting a variance of the required minimum front setback for the principal structure of 25 feet. The existing dwelling has a front yard setback of 12.3 feet. The proposed entry porch will be constructed atop an existing concrete open porch. The proposed front yard setback from the new porch addition will be about 6.5 feet. So, hello. Could you identify yourself for the record, and Mr. Karasik will swear you in?
That's Karen Gale, 11 Fidelity Place.
Hi, Ms. Gale. Could you raise your right hand, please? You solemnly swear the testimony you're going to give this commission is the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth? Thank you very much, and you've already stated your name.
So, Ms. Gale, we've been given a sheet of plans. Are you the owner or the architect?
The owner.
The owner.
We both share the same first name.
But you can't, and then you don't.
Is it light up?
Yep,
There you go.
that's good. Yeah, it could be confusing. The architect is Karen Brickman, and
Okay.
I am Karen Gale, the owner.
Okay, so you're the owner. So we've been given this sheet of plan, and we are looking at the porch. Could you just walk us through what the proposed addition is?
So if you can see the picture right now, it's you kind of walk up the stairs, and then there's the metal, and then when you open the door, it's directly into our living room. So we don't have any type of foyer or any type of hallway. So weather, wind. We have 2 children. As soon as you go through, everything comes through. So the proposed is just, there's already an existing concrete landing. We're not trying to pull it out further. We just want to enclose it to give sort of like a sort of entryway before getting into the house.
Right, which will, so then you'll have a new door on the front of the building.
Correct.
And then you're repositioning the stairs.
Yeah, because right now it's coming from the side,
Side,
and you'll
uh-huh.
and we just want to keep it as is, the enclosure, and then just have the steps coming from the front, which is similar to the other 3 houses on the street.
Okay. And so you're here because this is you're requesting a variance because it'll bring it closer to the sidewalk, which means that it's a variance that, and we need to look at it in terms of how it relates to the potential historic district.
Got it.
So, have you read the remarks that Mr. Conley, our consultant?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Conley, could you go over your remarks?
Hi, good evening. I think what you're planning on doing here is great. I'm all for it. I would just like to tweak some of the details and you mentioned to be similar to some of your neighbors. So the 5 comments that I had had to do with the actual enclosure. Under comment number 1, I'm calling it a portico. We were looking to have appropriately designed eave that had a crown, a fascia, soffit, basically similar to some of your neighbors. So just add a little bit more detail to basically the top portion that surrounds, just underneath the roof
Okay.
line. Again, just look to your neighbors. Same thing for my comment number 2. I was wondering if you could consider using double hung windows as opposed to the casement windows, which would be more appropriate.
Okay. That seems very appropriate. Our only comment the architect said was just a security issue, was whether or not that would be a security issue in terms of that. But other than that, shouldn't see a problem with it.
I don't understand that comment, but windows are windows, but
Excuse me, could the record just please reflect that Ms. Carolyn Kane-Levy is, yes, at 7:45. Thank you. Go ahead, continue, please.
under my comment number 3, I was wondering if you could consider in place of the siding that you're proposing below the new windows, in place of the siding, maybe consider an actual paneled, wood paneled
Yes.
design,
Yeah.
which might work, look a little nicer. And I had a comment about the steps, your new stairs. Are they going to be wood or masonry?
She said wood, yes.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't clear on the drawings. They look like they were drawn as wood, but I just wanted to confirm that. And the 5th comment had to do with the railings. If we could change those to be wood instead of metal. The metal railings
Also
are kind of
wood.
more appropriate for the masonry stair that you used to have. Again, if you just look to the houses next to yours,
Definitely
Yeah.
like wood
And
better.
I-
So.
that would be fine. Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's I think it will work out.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the commission have questions? Mr. Reimnitz?
The existing stoop is brick, is that correct?
Yes.
Because it looks like it's drawn with
It-
corner posts. That's a little confusing to me. Is it all brick, or is it paneled in some way? The drawing here shows posts where the stoop exists. So I'm just wondering what that detail is.
John, I
Are you
believe
looking
that
at
does
6, the
exist.
proposed plan?
It's almost like there's a coining to the corners
there?
of, yeah, so.
Does it exist
Yeah,
like
it
that?
does, yeah.
Okay,
It
so it's
is
a-
all masonry, but it
You
does
can,
have.
you can
It's
see
a
the detail in the
coin,
photo
yeah.
in my memo on page 3.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. Okay, got it. That's fine. Question answered. Just questions at the moment, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Greenblatt?
Yeah, what, below the clapboard, beneath what is presently the windows, what, is there any kind of fascia there behind, just running flush to the ground?
I'm sorry, but underneath which windows? The,
If I'm looking, let me point this out here. Right
Yeah.
here, these, to the left and to the right of the steps.
right.
What surface is below the new enclosure? Is that masonry?
That's brick, existing brick.
That's
I
brick.
believe so.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
It's existing brick.
So they're reusing the existing brick? Even though the staircase is on the side? Okay. Okay, so this is going to be brick on either side of the steps?
Oh, yes.
This is not leaving,
No,
disappearing.
no,
It's
we're
the
just
front
closing
part.
it.
This part is the only,
I
the
see.
stairs that come down on the horizontal,
Side.
right.
Oh, right, are now moving to the center, and they're going to eliminate that front set of steps?
Right, and this is going to be wood with a
Mhm.
centered door and 2 windows on either side.
Right, I got it. I just, because of when you put the steps in, you're going to lose, are they solid brick or is that a brick veneer?
I think it's a brick veneer.
So you're going to need to reuse the brick veneer when you take out that staircase? Because you're going to have a void where when you remove that.
Okay.
So-
Patch it.
I think it's important that we put in the notes that they reuse or find a substitute that's consistent on the face.
Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a concern because the brick looks like it's painted, so yes, I do agree it should be infilled with a brick of appropriate size that matches the one that's there, but they're painted,
Right.
so.
Okay, just for consistency.
yeah,
It
you're
wasn't
right,
clear in the
yeah.
drawing, that's
Yeah.
why. I agree with our consultant who suggested that you stick with the double hung windows. And I also agree, this is a question section, so I won't comment any further.
No other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
I had a question about the removal of the existing stairs. Now, I understand that you're going to maintain the existing stoop and enclose that. The stairs are going to be removed and repositioned, but is this landing going to remain, or is that going to be new?
As in the landing, like for the steps?
The landing for the steps.
If they can, they're not really sure yet. If they
Mhm.
can, then in terms of just the size, they might just keep the landing and then just do
Keep the landing and then just
I-
do 3 new steps. Okay.
You had a question?
And are there any functionality issues, now that you're enclosing the stoop with keeping the stairs oriented to the driveway? Or is it more an aesthetic change?
Well, I don't know if you can see the picture, that's pretty well all the driveway has right now. It's like really tiny, and on the other side of us, there is no house, it's just a dead end. So in terms of just function, with the kids and everything.
frees up more space
yeah,
for the drive.
as soon as
Okay,
we come
understood.
up, it's just really difficult, like unloading stroller, groceries, all of
Right.
that.
Does that driveway at the street, or I'm sorry, the garage at the street end, it's the back of the garage, but there's a garage door. Is that active?
It's not our property.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I understand, but just in terms of
No, I've never
them
seen.
going in and out. Okay.
No, I'm not sure who actually owns it.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Ms. King, maybe, do you have any questions? Mr. Rooney?
So you're gonna keep the existing top of landing. When I'm looking at it, I understand, like taking it out and making it a lot easier to go things in that type of furniture. And so you don't have to make the corner. I was wondering if it's really wide. It really should be a little wider.
Okay.
But that's the only question I have, and has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
You're referring to the landing or to the
No,
doorway?
the steps
Landing and the step.
Oh,
and the
landing
steps. Because it appears that it'll be the width of the door.
Just a little bit more.
Right,
Wider.
and just
Yeah.
maybe a little bit wider.
Okay.
I have no further questions either. Thank you. So, do you want to start a discussion then?
Start around here, yeah.
Mr.
In general, I don't have a problem with the orientation. I agree that the wood railing coming down the side should be a little bit like the image that you have on this plan, right next door, across the street. There's a railing, this railing right here,
Okay.
to do something like that. The other thing is, I think that the casement windows and there's 4, 6, 8 casement windows, they really don't fit the character of the house. What I'm not supposed to be doing design here, but I would encourage you just to do a single window on either side of the door and a single window on the side, and make them raise the fascia up so everything lines up across the facade. I just saved you 4 windows, okay? But I think at the end of the day, that would be more appropriate. That's all my comments.
And actually, I think that might work out better if you were going to widen the stairs.
Right.
Right, 'cause then it would possibly line up with
That would help.
pilaster or a
Yeah.
column. Typically, the railings die into columns.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenblatt?
Well, I made the comment earlier just to make sure that there's consistency in the brick surface, if there's any loss of brick, that there's a consistency maintained. I want to also support our consultant's suggestion that there needs to be, you're going to need it for drainage also, but you're going to need some form of cornice on the, above the door. You might even need to have a gutter or a drip edge. So I don't see that in the drawing here. When you're looking at the plan, or I'm sorry, at the side elevation, there's no kind of water treatment or any kind of reveal here. So I would encourage your architect to have some form of gutter, perhaps shaped in the form of a cornice, and for the purposes of
Draining water, you're gonna have a big ice problem sitting on that stoop if you don't get the water away.
And when you walk in, if you're like walking into the house, even in the rain, it's gonna be gushing on your head. That's pretty much it. The clapboard on the house presently, is that wood siding?
Sorry, the
Is the
clapboard?
clapboard wood on the house?
What is a clapboard?
The strips on the side of the house?
Siding.
The siding.
It's not- I think, no, it's vinyl.
It's vinyl.
It's vinyl, okay. Will you be using the same material in the front, the vinyl?
No.
No, I think we haven't really, she's giving me other options when the contractor comes through, but I don't think so.
Do we want to put any kind of commentary on that?
Well, Mr. Conley just suggested panels underneath the windows.
Yeah.
Recessed panels.
Oh, okay.
And what about on the west and east side?
Same, yeah, all the way around.
Okay. Recessed panels as opposed to vinyl siding. So no more vinyl siding.
No, I think it'll be a nice improvement on the house. You might even want to put some flower boxes underneath the windows. I think it'll be very pretty.
Thank you.
I don't have any other comments, other than, I support the recommendations that Mr. Conley and fellow commissioners have made. I do want to just state that, I would recommend the granting of the variance for the, orientation of the steps.
Thank you. And I noticed that there is actually, before it hits the driveway, you've got it looks like a piece of slate, a piece of wood.
Yeah.
So if the steps come down 6 inches closer to the driveway, what will you fill in that?
Are you talking about right under the step? Like,
Right.
It's just removable brick. It's not. Are you talking about the in the picture? Right. It's not actually in there. It was just decoration.
But when you take away these steps and you put the new ones in, they're going to set back from the existing sidewalk. So you're going to have a flat piece there that you're going to have to fill.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I thought it was stone. Do you know?
It's not. It's just the regular driveway slash like.
The asphalt?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's
Well, you're
nothing
just going to
there.
have to consider that you need something there
Yeah.
before
it hits the sidewalk.
before it hits the sidewalk.
Got it.
So does this existing stairs, are they built on top of the asphalt?
As far as I know, yeah.
Oh, they're all right on top of the asphalt. So you're
Yeah.
actually going to place the new wooden stairs on top of the existing asphalt?
Exactly.
Okay, all right. So then you won't have a problem with how it meets the sidewalk?
Okay.
Okay, if that's,
I don't think so, because I think it's, I mean, if it is, you're right, it would be about a foot, but I don't think it's more.
okay, thank you. Ms. Kane and Mr. Rooney?
Same thing, I have nothing to add. The next time you do a renovation, you can take off the vinyl siding and find what's underneath.
You might be surprised. You might have,
Surprised, right?
I mean, we're hoping that would be the next thing to do.
That'll be the next thing.
Yeah.
You won't worry about it.
right, so don't put vinyl on this piece so that you okay, thank you. So, Mr. Petto, do you have a list of recommendations?
Yes, I do. So I had, essentially for Mr. Connolly's comments, I believe it was number 1, 2, 3, and 5. And then the additional comment was Mr. Greenbaum's that consistent brick surface be used to infill the gap once the stairs are relocated. I think, so that was a total of 5 comments on the application. And then Mr. Hyman's statement of support, the variance act, relief being sought.
I'm sorry, can you read the comment?
Sure.
Which
So
comments?
it's number 1 from Mr. Connolly's memo. Portico shall have an appropriate design, eaves, crown, fascia, soffit, bed mold, and frieze. Number 2, applicant shall consider, I think that we'll change this. Applicant shall employ double hung windows in place of
Single on either side of the door.
And single, yes, that's
and
correct. So double hung, but a
on the
single
sides
window on each side.
To line up with the existing windows.
One
of the
over one.
house.
1 over 1. Right.
1 over 1, yeah.
Okay. And then number 3, applicant shall employ a recessed panel design in place of siding below the new windows on the porch. 5, the proposed new railing is to be of wood with newel posts, top and bottom, and balusters. And then the applicant is to employ consistent brick surface to infill following the relocation of the stairs, and that the commission supports the granting of the variance.
And are we going to add anything about gutters to the,
Sure. Can that-
because that should be in addition to number 1.
Okay. Okay.
And it's also important that the windows line up with the, as Mr. Ryman said.
Sure,
with
I'll
the-
add that to the window condition.
Right.
Can, when it comes to the gutters, on the new portico, you probably wanna make sure that they're, brought to the back, into the corner behind the house, to the side, so they're discreet, angle them backwards. And I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but it'd be nice, I would recommend some nice shrubbery in front of the brick base of the foundation.
So, you've got 6, are they 5 or 6 recommendations?
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Could
So-
we talk about the windows a little more?
Sure.
If that's all right. I think we should add that the head and sill of the windows should line up with the existing, right? So that may push the edge of the roof up higher and actually change the pitch of the roof.
Yeah, it would change the pitch.
Yeah, which I think would be beneficial. This
Yeah.
is a little too steep.
Yeah, I would rather have the windows line up. than
Yeah, no, I agree.
Worry about the
Yeah, but I
pitch,
think we
yeah.
should say the head and sill of the window should match the existing.
Okay, that's a good observation, yeah. So, when does this go?
This is scheduled in June at the zoning board.
Oh, good, okay. So, yeah, so good luck, and hopefully you'll be able to take away that vinyl, see what's on your knife. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, our... Our next application is a referral from the planning board. It's application 2608, 467 to 469 Bloomfield Avenue. It's GARE Venture Montclair Bloom LLC. This is a minor site plan application for building renovation and an addition in the C1 Central Business Zone. The building is located within the Town Center Historic District. And we are reviewing this because the property, as I said, is in the C3 Central Business Zone District. We're looking at it, a variance is required from Montclair Code 347-100, 5C1, which has a maximum building height of 37 feet, and the height of the new addition is 40.66 feet. This property is in the Montclair Center Historic District and is noted as a contributing building in the historic Central Business District. The description of the building from the Historic Resource Inventory is attached, and everybody's got a copy of this within their packet. And I think this is known locally as the Hampton House building, correct? So we understand that you're requesting a variance to go up a little bit higher. If you could just walk us through what you intend to do on the exterior of the building, as brief as possible, that would help us in our understanding of what we'll be discussing. Okay?
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, I have to sit out on this one. I just see that one of the owners is a client of mine, of the building.
Okay.
Not these people, but unfortunately, their partner.
Oh, okay.
So I will sit down there.
Okay, so,
Okay, so.
You
my
have
na-
the authority to swear someone in.
yes, so if you would state your names and your relationship to this project, what your titles are, and then I'll swear you in, so.
Great. So my name is Gary DeBode. I'm one of the owners of the property.
Mhm.
I'm Jared McCormick. I am a representative of the architect.
Of the architect.
Yes.
Okay, so can I swear them in together, or do they have to be separate? Okay, but do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. So, like I said, if you could walk us through what you're planning to do to the building. We're here because you're requesting a variance and you're going up higher on the building, but because it's in the Central Business District, we are also concerned with what you're doing on the exterior of the building as well, okay?
Yeah, so on the existing east side of the building, there is currently a two-story void between the adjacent property to the east and the main structure of the Hampton House. The intent was to infill that with a new two-story addition on top of the existing one-story, and to take that up to a height matching floor to floors of the existing second and third floors. The intent was to take that up to, as you said, 40 feet and 8 inches, and which is an increase of 10% over the allowable building height for that district. Do you want an explanation of just that, or would you prefer to?
No, and then if that's your explanation for the height variance, could you just give us some detail of what you're going to be doing on the exterior on Bloomfield Avenue and also on Fullerton?
Yep,
And the
sure.
back, because you can see it from the public right-of-way.
Our particular purview is what's going to be visible from public rights
Right.
of way.
Yep, okay. So, do you have the most current set of drawings that was delivered? I believe it's dated April 25th. Just
Yeah,
wanna
it's
make
dated
sure I'm-
25th. It was
okay.
received in our office April 12th, but it's, the date on the drawings was April 25th.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So if you would refer to let's start on the first floor plan.
What number is that?
A sheet A1.
Okay.
And we will start on the Bloomfield Ave side of the project. Starting at the southeast corner of the existing building, the intent was to create a new accessible entrance from Bloomfield Ave into the building to connect to a new elevator to allow the remainder of the building to be inaccessible to all floors, basement through third. With that work, that would disrupt the existing storefront, create a new opening, reinstate a small section of storefront to make the new stairs and elevator access possible. As you continue down towards the corner of Bloomfield and Fullerton, the intent was to just replace in kind the existing storefront. Right now, it's kind of a mishmash of historically, probably 1945, 46, when the building was renovated, storefront and newer solid block aluminum storefront framing. The intent was to replace all of that to be consistent.
And those are the windows on the Fullerton side, correct? I mean,
On the Bloomfield side.
on the Bloomfield,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, just matching the exact mullion and mutton pattern layout, but new material. Including the corner entrance on Bloomfield and Fullerton. Now, as you return down through Fullerton, the same concept with the existing windows is just to replace those in kind with newer, consistent aluminum frame storefront windows. The next section of new work is along Fullerton. Currently, there are a long stretch of precast panels on the facade. We propose to provide two new storefront openings, new storefront matching the replaced storefront. And as you continue to the end of the building on the northwest corner, we are proposing a new entrance to the building to access the lower level and also access the first floor.
And a ramp, a handicap ramp is your proposal
Yes.
as well?
Yes,
Right, 'cause
yes.
that's important. And what about the existing facade? Is the existing facade, what were you,
As far as the only disturbance on the facade would be at the first floor,
The first
first
floor.
floor level.
okay.
And the only disturbance would be where we're installing the new storefront openings.
I see.
And above that would be the signage as well. That would be part of the
Right.
part of the scope of the project.
Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of what you're doing to the facade or that basically describes all of it? Okay.
So it's an elevator bulkhead, is that what the variance is for?
Excuse me?
The height of the elevator bulkhead, I'm not following, is that why?
It's for the addition that's in the northeast corner.
Okay, but the only thing that exceeds the height of?
Yeah, as far as we understand, that the only thing that exceeds the allowable height would be the elevator bulkhead.
Yeah, that's what they have written.
Yeah.
Is there an elevation
Wait.
of the elevator bulkhead looking head-on from, I guess, Bloomfield Ave?
There is an elevation. If you go to sheet A5, there's an elevation of the north facade.
And where is I see
So the infill addition would be where you see the shaded gray. You have two windows. It's approximately 11 feet and 1 inch wide.
You're talking about in the picture, oh, okay, hold on here.
Yeah, on sheet
here.
A5.
And that's accessible from the door on the northeast in the plan. Because that space is not accessible to the street, that location where you're doing the infill. To access that, you have to come in from North Fullerton. Is that right?
No, you can access that from
Bloomfield.
Bloomfield. Well, if you enter from the existing entrance on the corner of Bloomfield and Fullerton,
Right.
you can access, if you go to sheet A1, I'm sorry. To access that, you would have to go in from the entrance, the new entrance on Bloomfield, go up the new stairs and elevator to the second and third floors.
So the elevator I'm looking at here in this drawing on A1, the infill section is here?
On the first floor, that space exists on the first floor. The building is built out to the property line on the first floor only.
Got it.
When you
I
get to the
see.
second and third, it's not.
So you're extending it, so basically.
Look at page 5 of the memo.
Okay.
So you can
Yeah. So essentially, with the exception of the height exceeding it, it's really not visible from really any angle.
No, an extreme angle, maybe a little further down North Fullerton, but
That's correct, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
If you look at sheet A5, that
You-
shows you the,
You don't have a roof plan, do you? That would
Yes.
help. You do?
yeah,
Oh.
it's noted on the site plan actually, to show the, and you'll find another the same on sheet A3.
Are you eliminating the existing elevator in the building?
Yes.
Okay.
So before we ask any more questions, are you finished with your description of the exterior and what's going on the roof too?
Okay, I'll go in, so I'll discuss the existing elevator, that would be internally demolished, and that would also include the existing bulkhead of that elevator that's currently on the corner of the northwest corner of the building. As we come around to that north facade, the new addition would be consistent with the finish, the exterior facade of the existing building on Fullerton.
Mm-hmm.
And the intent was to finish the cladding in a synthetic stone veneer, monolithic in appearance, as the same as the North Fullerton and Bloomfield facades.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conley, can you go over the memo that you, project comments that you've written about this?
I think what you're proposing is actually in keeping with the existing design of the building, or the altered design, the Art Moderne style of the building. I don't see any major structural changes to any of the bays, and typically buildings like this, especially the storefronts, change over time. I think what you're doing actually fits in well keeps the same appearance. So I think that's very good. I think you should document all of the features that you're proposing to demolish, just to have a record of those for the future. These types of buildings are disappearing more and more, and there's not many of them left, so it would be great if somebody in the future decided to restore this building back to what it is today. We did have a record of that, so anything that you're planning to demolish or remove or alter, I think should be detailed with drawings, and maybe save some of the materials. That was under my comment number 3. Comment number 4 was a roof plan. I was looking at your site diagram. It doesn't show that much detail, but it would have helped us to understand exactly where the elevator bulkhead was going and where the elevator bulkhead was being demolished. I do have a question about the material of the existing roof. Is it asphalt or slate?
The existing roof
Yeah,
of the existing main portion
Yeah.
of the building? It's asphalt shingles.
And same thing, under my comment number 5, all the new materials that you're proposing to use, I don't think they were detailed to exactly what all of them were, so if we could know that maybe in advance, it would be helpful to see how they match up. The same thing under my comment number 6, the proposed materials for the infill of the addition. What were the materials going to be for that infill area?
As far as-
Is that masonry, or is it wood construction, or it's not really shown on?
As far as
the-
construction, it would be light gauge metal framing with, you're talking about-
The exterior materials.
Exterior material would just be like an ephes or a synthetic stone veneer.
So-
Very similar to the precast cladding that's currently on there.
Okay, similar but not the same.
Yes.
Okay. Under my comment number 7, I think mock-ups of all this new construction that you're doing are going to be extremely important, because this is a very visible project. It's a great building. So it would be important that we match up all the materials. And under my comment number 8, cut sheets for any proposed and actually detailed drawings of, I guess, the lighting, the signage. Is there any new signage that or lighting that you're proposing to the exterior other than this?
We
signage?
don't have any currently
Okay.
proposed to the exterior.
And for the signage, we're proposing new signage to be like the existing, but with the respective tenants.
So same materials and same color of the neon and. And I'm suggesting, well, obviously the signage, that should be saved, maybe stored somewhere, maybe in the attic, basement. With regards to the ramp along North Fullerton, I think the design works fine with the location and the building, but I think the way the railings are drawn actually don't comply with current code. I know this is kind of out of our purview, but I think the way the code requires the railing to go past the bottom tread, right? So that would put it onto the next property if that were to happen, right? It would be in front of the building next door, which, if that were my building, I don't think I would be happy, right?
Does it go that direction?
Yeah, right, there's stairs that come down along here, right? And then the railing would have to extend past the bottom tread and underneath adjacent building.
That's just something that you should be
Yeah.
aware of. That's what Mr. Conley.
Yeah, and that was it. I think this is a great project.
Mr. Reinans, do you have any questions to ask of the applicants?
Is the lettering on the signage going to be the same height as what's there now? Same size?
It would be up to the permitted size. So right now, I believe the signage is a little taller than what's allowed. I think you're allowed 24 inches.
Yeah, right. So-
I guess we would give you,
Yeah, just to add to this, the applicant will require variance relief for replication of the existing signage, so any commentary that
we would give you a
HPC would
bigger
want to
sign
support that.
in order to match it.
That's a separate application.
Yeah, yes.
It's going to be part of their application. The variance request will be part of their approval at the planning board. So we'll need the variance from the planning board as part of that approval.
The signage.
As far as the size of the signage. My suggestion would be that the HPC recommend a condition that the applicant come back for you guys to do final review and approval of
Yes,
the
I agree.
material finality of the signage, but they will need a variance from the planning board for the height of the signage. And the planning board is the body that has the jurisdiction to grant that deviation.
Right, but wouldn't they have sent it to us first?
So they're adding that as part of their application.
This present application?
Correct.
Oh, okay,
To
good.
replicate the size
I
of the
see.
signage. Sorry,
That's okay. The entrance on North Fullerton. Where does someone go when they go inside that door? They're going up a half a flight to the ground floor retail,
Yes, they would.
and they're going down half a flight to another tenant.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. What is the railing made out of, that's on that ramp there, and steps down the stair? What are you envisioning the material to be?
It would be either aluminum or metal.
Aluminum or metal?
Yes.
Okay.
Steel.
I'm sorry?
Steel.
Steel?
Yes.
Okay, got it. That entrance, I just find it interesting because it looks like that's where you should go in this building. It's become such a big element. Is that are people going to, I guess, is the public meant to go in that way?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's all my questions.
Thanks. Mr. Greenblatt?
So I just want to make it, put it on the public record, and I'm sure you must be aware of this, but I don't know if Tom is. This building was originally a brick-faced Romanesque building that was redone in the 1940s. So I don't know to what extent the renovations and the infill that you're doing will impact any elements or any material or anything that relate to the original facade. But I would just ask that if they ever wanted to return to the original facade, there should be some consideration for
Yeah, there may be
leaving that
some
option.
facade elements of maybe penetrations of windows or doors behind what they're planning on removing. So yeah, it'd be great if we could document that as well.
Right, so that should be documented, because this building was, as you might know, had an entirely different, entablature, rhythm.
Correct, yes.
And penetrations were different. And both are attractive, but so I guess my point is concurrent with Tom, it should be documented so that if, at any given time, and if you could preserve elements of that as much as possible, that would be great. I have one question. How are you going to access to build this infill section? Because it's completely landlocked. You're in between two different tenants, two other buildings. Are you building it from within, from inside?
We're still trying to figure that out, whether it's the bolted steel or if we can pick a crane over and drop the columns in. We're still, most of it will be built from within.
Yeah.
But the question is the structure. That's the only thing we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, I know the building, it's very tricky because you're completely blocked in there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Mr. Hyman?
No comments.
So just for me to understand, what you're proposing for a variance is to raise that elevator piece, right, which is right here on the corner, correct? In the height? Oh, no, it's moved. That'll be demolished,
That's
and then
being
it's
demolished.
moving further towards the center, toward the middle of the to the middle of the block.
Correct.
Okay, so then it goes up. Okay, now I get
And
it.
does it exceed the peak of the, it's below the
No.
peak of the
The-
truss top
The
building?
new elevator?
Yeah.
No, it will not exceed the existing cornice.
Oh,
The rear elevation plan shows that on sheet A5. So view looking southward, if you're at the Chase Bank, looking south on North Fullerton, this is the rear of the building that you'll see. And you can see the proposed addition, you see the peak of the roof,
Where's the elevator?
and then the addition is to the left.
Right, and I mean, it's hard
And that's
to tell.
actually even not flush with the rear of the building, that's set in 10 feet.
No, I understand, I just wasn't quite sure how high. It's hard, this drawing doesn't necessarily, isn't, it's very small and it's very, the angle.
and I have a question. The existing windows that are on the second, third floor will remain?
Correct.
Okay, and then the two windows here where you're proposing to put, those will disappear?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and so I guess this is part of the structure that Mr. Conley said should be saved or stored somewhere in the basement or whatever. Okay, and what about underneath, I forgot what you call this, underneath what is that called? Yeah, the bulkhead, that will remain, because that's a very, design
red-
fit.
the
Under
red
the, under,
material?
Panels.
It's like red glass. isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
and what do you propose to make the bulkhead out of on the two new, windows that'll be on?
We would match that material.
You'll match that, so
Yes.
anything that is there, you will match?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's very handsome. for your
By the way,
proposal.
the Hampton House signage is not affixed directly to the building, but it's actually affixed to a box of aluminum.
Mhm.
Is that the intent for the future tenant, do you know, or?
Yeah, we were trying to match the existing, just to be different letters, and we can save the old,
The box.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what they indicated on the, on this,
Yeah.
right. Those are my questions.
I don't see any details about the storefront framing.
Yeah.
So, that's something I'd like to take a look at and see.
Okay.
So label the drawings with materials and some sections for the storefront as well.
Would you suggest that you bring it back for that?
Well, I think this would come back to the,
Pursuant to my notes, and based on comments that I've heard, I have a
Right.
recommended condition that the applicant return
Right.
following approval by the HPC for final review and selection of all finished materials,
finished material,
Mhm.
okay.
including the storefront system.
So this would come to the full commission, not,
It's up to the HPC how we want to handle it. It can either be a
Okay.
revisions committee in the
Or-
field,
or
or
is
it
it a
can be
revisions
here.
committee?
It's up to, we'll handle it however typically what we do in those circumstances, we bring it first to the revisions committee. If the revisions
Right.
committee doesn't have consensus, then we'll return
we'll
to the full
bring it
commission.
back, okay. So you have that comment then, Ms. King, ladies? Anything else? Mr. Rooney?
You appeared before me and in another. Did you lower the elevator bulkhead? Because we were talking about that, whether or not you needed to have that height.
Yes, I can help. And so that's why the applicant submitted revised plans. At the initial
Yes.
meeting that Mr. Rooney is referring to, the Development Review Committee meeting, the applicant originally exceeded the
Exceeded
maximum
that.
permitted height of the new zone by more than 10%, which triggers a D6 variance.
Right.
Which would have to go to the zoning board, but the applicant has lowered that so that the application will stay
Okay,
with the
that's
plan.
what I just want to make
Well,
sure.
just to be clear, we lowered the roof, but the elevator bulkhead is slightly higher. I think it's 1.5
A foot and a half higher
Yeah,
than.
but it was,
which is
it was like
necessary
10
for-
feet below.
Like that?
Previously, it was like 10 feet.
Oh, okay.
When you lowered
Yeah,
that.
it's definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
just
it's
had
the minimum that
wanted
it can
you
be for the overrun.
Look into that to see if
Yeah.
you really needed to have all that over space. Okay, that's it. It's a great project.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Remnitz? Yes.
I think in general, it all looks really great. Comments would be the railing along North Fullerton should be some sort of bar, steel, or bar, aluminum instead of round, more in keeping with what the building is all about.
Agreed.
Mm.
I think, I have a, not a big problem, I don't have a problem with lots of things. The fact that taking away the panels along the North Fullerton side and replacing that with glass, that's great. That's a big improvement. I don't really understand why the entry glazing is so tall, and why you interrupted that line that runs around the building. That's all about, this kind of building is all about lines and continuing art around. Interrupted that and made this a very important entry. I
Correct.
would suggest that, it also creates a situation where if you want to put more signage on that ledge that's running around, you might want to put signage right there. Otherwise, it'll jump off the wall somehow. So I would encourage you to keep that fascia, the cornice line running level all the way around.
It's a good point. Mr. Greenbaum?
Yeah, I would concur actually with Mr. Remnitz regarding the stair railing. It would be great if you could do like a flat stock aluminum to kind of play up the Art Deco, very smooth, very linear but like a nice flat with some parallel lines, but, you know, spaced apart. But something that's consistent with the kind of streamlined aesthetic of the building. Turn it into like instead of just a pure utility function, but something somewhat aesthetic. That's really it. I think the solution, that building has always been a conundrum on how to plan circulation, and I think the way you approached it, I'm curious as to how you're going to execute it, but it seems to be a good solution.
No comment.
I concur with Mr. Reimnitz. I think taking out that top transom window over the, that new staircase would really do a lot. I mean, I understand maybe you wanted to add that to focus on a new staircase, on the new addition to the building, but I see that line just running down North Fullerton. You might want to speak to that as the architect?
Yeah, I was just going to say, can I respond, or do we need to wait? I just didn't want to speak out of turn. So there are two things that were driving that that design of that entrance.
Mm-hmm.
One is actually, we have documentation that the original building had a rusticated stone treatment that actually emphasized that existing entrance. There is an existing photo of the building that does show that.
Why isn't, that would have been helpful to provide.
So the other thing was that if you look at this Art Deco, well, late Art Deco, streamlined modern style, they do emphasize with a vertical element at entry points.
So the difference between Art Deco and Art Moderne is Art Deco is more vertical in its treatment,
Yes.
and Art Moderne is more horizontal. So we're kind of mixing styles here,
Yes.
which we probably don't want to do.
No, but and we
So I
did.
agree with all the comments.
I mean, we did find evidence that was in Art Moderne.
Yeah, so yeah,
style.
it would be great to see that photograph. That
Yes.
might help.
Yes.
Of this version of the building, not the earlier 19th century.
No, it was the earlier 19th century
Oh,
brick.
well, that's not really relevant
Relevant,
anymore.
yeah.
This
Well-
building has been altered.
We felt it was because it reintroduces that side of the building as an entrance. Because what we're trying to do with that entrance down there is provide, access to lower level and all the upper levels off of that section of the building.
But you're emphasizing it by creating almost like a shadow box effect too. You're bringing out the vertical elements too. It's just, I think we agree that the line going straight might.
I just wanted to add to
Yeah.
our thought process of going through that, looking at that historic photo, that entrance did exist in
Right.
the previous state, that it had
Okay.
been kind of covered over.
No, I think
During
we're
the
okay with
renovation.
the entry being there. It's
Yeah.
just maybe the height of the overall. So maybe we could.
Do you have any other?
Yeah, and I think, I agree that datum should continue. If you want to emphasize the entrance by maintaining, pushing it out, making it a little prouder, which is what you're doing here, I think that would probably serve to identify the entrance as an important entrance.
I have no further comments. I think the most important thing about this building is the sign. And just to keep the size and the scale there.
And that aluminum box that's existing
And the
there.
aluminum box,
That's
right.
already there, so the scale doesn't jump out. And then, and those lights that we're getting now with that shine out, what do they call that? Come out from the, what is that? Halo lighting. This is going to be a true neon.
Yes.
That would
Okay.
be true neon.
Yes, which also requires variance relief.
Requires a variance.
Okay.
Would you consider, that, there's a concern about the linearity and that dado line, maybe to make the entrance proud there and to create distinction, it might be interesting to have a projection, just a horizontal projection that comes out off, maybe on the same level of the datum, but just projecting out, so it brings from, when you're looking down North Mountain from Bloomfield Avenue, you can see the entrance, and maybe in the future, that can incorporate signage in the future, or, some kind of
and possibly covers the ramp and landing and stairs.
Right, and it would provide some kind of a rain guard. But I think that could be interesting. That would give you the distinction and the primacy of the entrance. And that's a solution.
Thank you.
What a thank you.
Okay, so, any other comments? No. So Graham, can you,
I have 5 recommended conditions. The first is the applicant shall detail the removal of and preserve all elements to be removed from the existing building. The second is that the applicant is to employ a rail bar of steel aluminum in place of the proposed round rail along the ramp on the North Fullerton facade. The applicant is to maintain the fascia line at the height of the new entry on North Fullerton to be consistent with the remainder of the building. The applicant is to maintain the size, scale, and mounting panel of the existing signage in the proposed new sign design for the building, and that the applicant is to return to the HPC for final review and selection of all finishes, materials, including the signage.
on the first, could you read the first point, please?
Sure. The applicant is to detail the removal of and preserve all elements to be removed from the existing building.
Should we add that include the windows that we know, because there might be other things, but including those two smaller windows and the facade. What is the facade made of now? That covers the brick. What is it?
Precast concrete.
Yeah, if that can, I don't know if you'd be able to save that. So now, shall this come to the revisions committee, or do we ask?
So how we do it is I just put the full commission, and then that flexibility lies with the revisions committee. So it starts with the revisions committee. If they feel it's too big of a scale for them to review, then it can advance to the full
Okay,
commission.
all right.
That's typically how I handle that. So we can do the revisions committee for smaller elements. You know, they may come in with just the railing, and you can start with that. But when they come in with the storefront system, the revisions committee may say, this is a big element, let's come to the full commission. So you can kind of play it like that.
Okay.
And then in the preamble, you'll have the provision about recommending the approval of that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you mention that you mentioned the handrail in terms of the material? Read the section about the handrail,
As Mr. Ryman said, a rail bar of steel aluminum instead of the proposed round rail along the ramp on the North Fullerton facade.
Could we go, I mean, without crossing our boundary, can we say like a flat stock as the railing material, like a aluminum, silver aluminum?
My recommendation would be to maybe keep that as is, and that's included as an element that will return for review by the EPC.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That way we don't have to get too finite in the details of it.
We know-
Raymond Hood, Rock Center.
Yeah, I know what you're speaking about, so that's,
Like the post could be round. with a
So we
flat
have
stock.
6. We have 6 recommendations?
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. Seems like a very good project, and look forward.
Do you have a tenant in mind? Is there a tenant already?
We do, but we can't disclose it. It's not signed, but they also made us sign a confidentiality.
Got it.
But yeah, it's a tenant, I think, for what?
Good enough.
It's not a bar.
We don't have a parking.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the other part, that's the part for the-
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
if we have questions about documentation process, who would I address that?
You contact Mr.
Yeah,
Petto.
we can work together on that in our
Okay.
office.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, our next application is a referral from the Planning Board. Application 2624, 49 Orange Road, Montclair Community Pre-K. This is a minor site plan application for grading and drainage of a new playground in the public zone. We are looking at this because, hold on. The subject property is located in the Town Center Historic District. The 2 buildings on the subject property are identified in the 2003 nomination report for the district as key buildings in the district: the old primary school and the first primary school. Their survey forms for each of these buildings are attached to this report, and everybody should be familiar with this. This is key buildings by the circle there, right?
That's right.
Okay. So,
Raising your right hands, please. You can both do it together. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're going to give this commission is the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I do.
Okay, now each of you, could you just state your name and your relationship to this project?
Okay. I'm Amy Dorr. I'm the executive director of the pre-K, and just kind of taking the process from beginning to end.
And David Plaisek, member, member of the Board of Trustees of the Montclair Early Childhood Corporation, which is the operator of MCPK.
Thank you.
okay, so what we are looking at is a complete redo of the existing playground, correct?
Correct.
And can you walk us through what you intend to do in terms of, we're looking at the relationship to the two buildings that are in the historic district, and what you plan to do in terms of surface and equipment and drainage, and it looks like you've got a landscaping scheme up there as well.
Yeah, that's right. We submitted to the commission the site plan, and I think one of the comments that Mr. Connolly came back with was a rendered site plan, so we brought that this evening. I've got copies to distribute to everybody if you'd
Oh,
like it as
yes,
well.
please, that's great.
Here,
'cause
other
I-
than Dave, so while you were talking.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll also, just as per the comments, this is the equipment details.
Oh, good. If you could, yeah, that would be great.
Are you related to Jack Ford?
I am, that's my dad.
No, you don't.
My dad is, I won't say he's like the mayor, because I said that to
No,
Robert Jackson.
No, that'd be Eddie
He
Cassidy.
really was, yes.
David.
Oh, that's not an issue.
Just to also note that this was the conceptual drawing, so it has been, the plan has been revised. You have the updated plan, but it's not quite as rendered in terms of visuals.
Okay, thanks.
Just for looking at the building.
Okay, so who's
Yeah.
going to walk us through the plan?
Yeah, I'll walk you through it as quickly as possible. So the existing playground was installed over 20 years ago, and while it currently is safe for the students to play on, the useful life and safety is quickly coming to an end. So this project is to effectively redo the playground surfacing. That's removal of the existing sod that remains. The majority of the coverage of the playground today is a wood mulch. And we're going to replace that with a few different surfaces. The main surface area, which is the lighter colored green left of your concept plan, is going to be sod. To the right of that, the darker shaded grass area is going to be an artificial turf. That's going to house the majority of the play equipment. Most of that play equipment is movable play equipment. There's one large structure, play structure, that'll have footings and will be permanently affixed to the ground. Everything else is more temporary in nature and could potentially be relocated to other locations within the playground. The figure eight pathway that you see is a new installation. It's going to be an asphalt pathway that'll allow circulation and accessibility throughout the entire playground. Currently, that does not exist. There is existing bluestone rectangular pavers that kind of cross from the site. I guess it would be coming from the east to the west. That's, an irregular placement of those bluestone pavers. Those are going to be retained and relocated throughout the site. There's going to be a new pathway that's consisting of those pavers along the, what is that, Church Street fence line. And then they're going to also access the gazebo that's in the lighter green shaded area as well. And then some other pathways throughout the project as well. So all the bluestone that's on site today is going to be reused and relocated within the existing site. And the asphalt pathway is going to be installed. It's a 5-foot wide path. And again, it provides accessibility and circulation throughout the entire playground. There's no modifications to the fencing on the site. The perimeter fencing is going to remain. That's not being changed. There are, I guess really only 2 main forms of ingress and egress from the, Orange Road side, and I guess you call it the Church Street / Valley Road side. There's 2 gates there that will remain as well and be connected to the new asphalt pathway.
Okay, that concludes your...
I could go into detail on all the playground equipment, but I don't think you want to go through that.
I'm going to add just one
Yeah.
or 2 pieces. We just sort of learned, initially, the plan was just to replace the equipment, but over the course of my time there this year, I noticed that water retention is a huge issue, and we came to discover that there's absolutely no grading or drainage currently on the playground. And as we've seen from Edgemont and some of the other parks in town, and in speaking with John Eshman, the Buildings and Grounds person for the Board of Education, and several other people, our safety surfacing right now washes away every time it rains because there's no drainage. So the water just pools, and then the wood chip that's currently there has to be 12 inches for it to be safe for children to have a use zone, a fall zone for any of this equipment. And that's why we're switching to both a different type of surfacing and why we are doing grading and drainage, primarily for safety reasons.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ryan, do you have any questions?
No. Have a comment or 2.
Okay. Mr. Greenbaum, questions?
I just want to confirm that I guess they're cypress trees, the very climbable cypress trees are all being retained?
Yes. We're not touching any of the trees that are there. In fact, that's a hard line. Yeah.
Those bring back good memories. And then, is there any berms, any kind of raised areas, little hills or anything like that? It's all flat.
Yeah, there was an earlier version of a plan that was taken into consideration, the installation or the buildup of a berm, but we took that out.
I'm just curious.
Cost.
Cost, not safety, but cost.
Cost,
No.
yeah.
Okay.
For the type of, so it would need to have a fall zone, so it would have to be in the area where we're doing the turf. And the type of turf that we're using has somewhat of an egg-shaped structure underneath to create the cushioning.
Right.
And to build a berm out of that and then somehow fix the berm with the turf
Right.
was an insurmountable cost issue,
Got it.
basically.
Okay. No, that's it for me.
Mr. Hayden?
No questions.
I have a couple of questions. The trees you've just said are going to be retained. Are you adding any more landscaping, any more trees?
Not at the current time.
Okay. It just looks as though it's a little bit more treed in your diagram that.
So there were additional trees there before for this plan. Between this plan and this plan, the town actually removed them for safety reasons. They were Bradford pears. I don't know if you've come across
Yeah,
the
and they'd
Bradford
fall
pear.
over.
But they were splitting.
Right.
So Steve Wood from Public Works determined, they came in to look at all the trees and see which ones were safe to keep and which ones had to go. And they determined that all 7 Bradford pears had to go. They were starting to do that middle fall that they do.
And you also testified that the existing fence is going to stay.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, in historic districts, the one thing that the Secretary of Interior does not like, nor do we, are chain link fences. And I'm just wondering if you're doing this intensive drainage, which sounds as though you're going to have a lot of equipment on the site. How do you think you're going to maintain the fence?
Yeah, there's access points, so there's gates that accommodate fire equipment along the Church Street
Right.
side of the fencing, so it's easily accessible by any type of heavy equipment.
Is there any consideration to replace the fence with something?
If somebody wants to give us the money to do it, we'd probably be happy to do it.
And part of the issue there is obviously this, we don't own this property. This is public land, Board of Education land. And we're doing, you know, we're paying for 4/5 of the project at this point, and fencing is a very a major cost point. So hopefully down the line, eventually that's something we would do, but right now it's safe. We're starting with safety and moving from there. So the current fence is structurally sound. So we're not going to replace it at this point.
And with the equipment that you're putting in, is there any consideration, it's a combination of natural materials and plastics?
Primarily natural materials
But
whenever
primarily?
possible. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's the whole point of the design is an inclusive natural playground.
Okay.
So every piece of equipment is inclusive. So children with special needs and typical children all could use the equipment simultaneously, and it could be accessed easily by both. And then the other major consideration is the idea of a natural playground. So rather than a metal and plastic structure like we have now, the play structure will be a custom-built cedar structure with a few plastic and metal elements, but they will be all in natural tones. So any of the elements that have to be man-made will all be in a color palette that will blend with the
So there won't
environment.
be oranges or
There will be no bright colors.
bright color, okay. And so the existing play equipment, like that's on figure 4 here on your, that's all going? Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you, those are my questions. Ms.
I don't have any
Kennedy?
questions.
Mr. Rooney?
No questions.
Okay, so, Mr. Conley, we didn't
Actually, I
speak to
do
yours.
have a question. What is the existing boundary of the current playground? Is it the same, or you were expanding?
No, same.
Same.
Same, exactly same.
Well, it would be if the fence is going to be
Right.
retained,
That's
correct? Okay. So,
And the grading around the buildings, it looks like you're building right up to one of the buildings there, right?
That's just, so it's what already exists, actually. These are garden beds that we already have in place. We're going to expand the beds a little bit, but this is just, it's what already is.
So you're building right up to the, or it exists right up to the foundation of the
exist right
existing?
up, right.
Yeah,
These
I'm
are
just
the-
concerned that we don't damage the existing buildings.
No,
there.
it won't be touched.
So the drainage doesn't flow towards the
on
buildings, right? It's away from
Do
the
you want to
buildings.
talk about the drainage plan a
That's
little
right,
bit?
yes. So the way the property currently drains is it, everything drains in here.
Okay.
So this is, if you come after a hard rain or a snow that melts, the playground effectively becomes unusable because this is
Pond.
covered in 8 to 12 inches of water. So the drainage is effectively going to be installed in this area, and then the interior drains.
So is the topography changing at all, or is
Minor.
it basically remaining the way it is?
Just
Yeah.
grading, these will be slightly graded, so
Okay.
that there's runoff this way towards, the perforated pipes go around here and then lead out to the catch basins on Church and Orange.
No net import or export or anything like that, just some minor shaping.
Do you have anything else to add based on your comments?
Any new lighting proposed, or no?
Nothing that would need to tap into the existing electricity or plumbing
Is there
system because.
existing lighting?
No, but the building itself, again, is not ours, and all the systems are rather antiquated, so we didn't do anything that would require that type of infrastructure.
So, I have one more this, I think you called this the figure 8, that's all asphalt?
That's asphalt.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there won't be any curbing around the asphalt?
No.
Where it meets up with the grass, it's just,
It's
It's
going
going
to
to be
a
a
straight.
vertical flush edge to the turf and the grass.
When you say vertical flush, I mean just it's going to be pavement and then grass?
Pavement and then grass.
No,
That's right.
no break?
No break.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Comments?
Comments? Okay. I just have one comment, which is the southwest corner of the site. That's all crushed stone and mulch, if I understand it correctly. What's nice, what seems to be, to me, nice about this is there seems to be a green buffer running around the existing playground and so on. And when I see the crushed gravel coming right to the street, maybe that's not such a great landscape solution in that corner.
It's not coming to the street per se.
This is the.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
And actually this, just to explain this is gonna be a digging pit, so it's gonna be dirt, so there will be some, and then these are fort building structures, so this whole area is like a working play, like a giant, enormous sandbox, basically, but not using sand because of the raccoons in Montclair, basically. So we're gonna be using different kinds of materials. But it will be like a kind of a digging thing. And then this border all along here is grass on the outside of the
On the
fence.
outside of the fence.
And right now, this is our driveway, and it's pretty old material that's there right now. It's not particularly luscious grass land over there, so.
I would just encourage more green, whatever, in that corner.
Not necessarily grass, but shrubs or something to that effect.
Yeah, something for the pedestrian who, maybe does, it's a small point, but.
But-
No, I hear what you're saying.
But like a four-season green of some sort?
Yeah.
Something, yeah.
We have some grasses and things like that are not pictured on here that we are either going to move so that could be, I don't know, anybody knows Miss Laura, but she has a lot of intentions of doing more planting. We just can't determine what the plantings will be until we actually see how the drainage works and how all that happens. But we fully intend to do more trees, more planting, all of that going down the line. Again, we just can't, we didn't want to put anything in that we didn't know was really going to be 100%.
It looks great.
Mr. Greenblatt?
I would just comment that this would be wonderful addition and improvement to that corner, and it would be really nice if it could coincide with the reactivation of the fountain directly next to it, which has been idle for some strange and odd reason, because I believe we were promised that would be.
That's part of the Valley project.
Do you have any sense of when that fountain will be reactivated?
I heard that they ran the water line over.
Yeah, I heard this summer, right? They're doing
That's all I know.
That's important.
Yeah.
The Economic Development Committee is taking that up and trying to come up with design proposals. In fact, it's on the agenda tomorrow morning for discussion, and it's been discussed previously. So that's where it is right now, and it has to get out of the Economic Development Committee. And then there'll be proposals, which I'm sure we'll all see, this commission and the planning board.
It would be great to really activate that whole circle there,
Yeah.
that whole region.
Thank you, Mr. for the update. Do you have another comment?
No.
How long would the playground be out of commission while you're doing all this?
During the down season, so looking to start demolition hopefully June 27th and complete.
June 27th?
Complete by
Next
mid
month.
to late
Oh,
August. Yeah.
Oh, great.
We have a very limited time span because we don't want the playground the kids to lose access to it.
Right. Do you have a comment?
No, it's a very nice project.
Mr. Rooney?
It'll be good.
Okay, so what do we have as recommendations, Graham?
Didn't have any conditions. There were no real conditions or requests, so I guess just a statement, a general statement of support.
The corner.
Oh, the
green-
corner, sorry, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yes,
John-
yeah, the
John-
more green in the southwest corner.
I
that
think,
was my one.
Add some shrubs.
shrubbery
Yeah,
along
I would-
any edging.
I would
any-
like to add that a new fence, if possible, be installed, even
Yeah.
if it's down the road. I mean, I think that's very important.
It's on our
that-
wish list. We
Yeah,
just-
that chain link is not appropriate in a historic district,
But I have a
so.
question from the point of view of safety and the children. What kind of fencing material would you suggest?
I don't know, for playground.
I mean, I
think
think
it would
one,
have to be
one-
investigated. I
One
mean,
possible solution that we've talked about or thought through, and actually for safety regulations would be better, is actually your suggestion to have trees and other kinds of plant life that would somewhat go around the edging, because that would also protect from street traffic.
Right.
Wood abutments are another thing that could be used in certain areas, or I guess a wood fence.
Well, a
could-
metal fence would work, right, if it had.
A wrought
balusters
iron
on
metal
it.
fence,
Right,
potentially.
one that wasn't climbable, right, if it had actual.
I mean, it would
balusters
definitely
and-
have to be.
Yeah.
I would
very
look at
particular.
laurels, skip laurels as a planting because they're evergreen.
Okay.
And they could be a nice buffer
Okay.
and very low maintenance.
Okay, that would be great.
So, I think that's
So
it
it's just
then.
those two items.
Yeah, those two items,
Mhm.
yeah. And when does this go to the?
So just to advise, this is a minor site plan seeking no variance relief because the property is located in the public zone. There's no
Right.
requirements in the public
Oh,
zone.
great.
So they're appearing before the Development Review Committee on Thursday of next week, May
Oh.
2nd, so they can get their approval and get started.
Great, okay.
But
so-
thank you for the rendered drawing.
Yeah, thank you, that was very,
Yes, thank
yeah, yeah. And thank you for
Thank
showing
you.
us this and confirming that they're natural material mainly. That's great.
And keep pushing to make sure the fountain gets done by the time you're done.
No, we were told that was happening, but
You might have some connections.
that's right. We've got so many things we need on that list of connections. If anybody comes across any playground grants that they'd like to send our way, or anybody who's interested in donating to the playground.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Do we need a break or should we show?
Let's just go through.
Okay, because it should be good. All right. Our next topic for discussion is goals and objectives, and Graham's put together 5.
Yes,
Has
this is
everyone been-
based on the comments at the March 28th meeting.
Right. Has everyone had a chance to review these, and would anyone like to add anything else?
Yeah, actually, I did want to add something. I came across a photograph of a sticker, a window glass sticker, that at one time, I don't know who was responsible for it, but any home that achieved its centennial, I guess, would get some kind of, we would offer them some kind of recognition of the home being 100 years old. And there was a beautiful sticker that I don't know when it was created, but I saw a picture of one and I thought it was very nice, and I think that might be something to commemorate houses, to offer people the opportunity to acknowledge that their house has reached 100 years old.
I think that's a great idea, because it will build interest in,
Historic preservation.
yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many houses we would have in the, you would get that from the tax
I
maps?
don't. One of the things that has been difficult, I know, is that the assessor data, as far as date of construction, is not always accurate. So it's difficult to ascertain the exact effective
I'm just thinking
date.
of a round figure,
Yeah,
you know.
I don't know.
500, I mean, there's got to be,
I'm
There were
not
about 100 houses or buildings that were 150 years
150,
old.
right.
And there's a huge amount of building in this town between 1865
Exactly.
and 19, let's see, it would be 1919 now. I'm just thinking my house is 1910, and tons of other houses are in that, you know, that whole range of 1900, 1920. So you're going to see, it's going to be a lot.
Yeah, well,
And I'm
maybe
just-
it's not 100 years old, maybe it becomes.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking
100.
how that numbers would affect our budget, because that sounds as though we would need,
Oh, for the stickers?
yeah,
I
so it has
mean-
to be a budget item.
Well, it's the kind of thing that basically to make 10,000
One of
stickers.
the, just to revive a suggestion that I've thrown out a couple of times is, I know that there is a community in South Jersey that does a vintage house designation program, whereby someone who perhaps goes through the Research Your House workshop, compiles a little one-page summary of the history of their property, submits an application to the commission, and then in this instance, in the town in South Jersey, they're awarded a little plaque that goes on the outside of their house that says this is a vintage house with the date of construction based on the research. I floated the idea to the Montclair History Center, and perhaps we could do a collaborative partnership with them. An application fee that kind of covers the cost of the plaque could
There you
be
go.
Yeah.
associated with that, and that would open up the opportunity to everybody who's not necessarily 100 years old, but anybody who's interested. We have lots of homeowners that are going through the Research Your Home workshop
Right.
process, and it's a way to get people thinking about preservation and perhaps interested in taking the next step to nominate their house.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of a gateway program to get people involved. So I
Maybe-
mentioned this previously, and I have discussed it a little bit with Jane Eliasoff over at the History Center, but that's something that perhaps the Education and Outreach
Yeah,
Committee
so
could-
let's add that for number
could work
6.
on.
Yeah, we'll do a 6 recognition of, what would, how recognition of,
We can maybe meet over the course of the next
Okay.
month and maybe announce something at our meeting in May, which is also Preservation Month. So it'd be a
Right.
nice.
Yeah, celebrate the vintage homes of Montclair, allow people to engage and actually feel part of it.
yeah.
Yeah, in Cranford, the Historic Preservation Advisory Board just did something similar. So they came up with a kind of a generic plaque that would go on important buildings in town and houses. And then they sent out letters to all of those buildings or the tenants or the owners of those buildings and tried to see who was interested in it because there was a fee attached with getting these metal plaques. So they did get a number of responses and maybe ordered 50 or 100 of them.
And we certainly.
And then
we-
sold them, actually. I think there was a fee.
Yeah, well, probably have 100 names, 100 people that have gone through these researching your home
Sure, so we have-
workshops, so that could be the first
Mhm.
audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's,
One
And
thing
then that
that I
also
had-
builds a portfolio of properties for walking tours and other
Right.
things. That
Right.
people can-
One thing I had suggested a few years ago is that a lot of people don't know that they're in a district. And if we could have like a little decal that would say, your storefront or something, it just has to be a dot. Just tells you that you're within a district of some sort. And then we have jurisdiction over it somehow. Maybe we can incorporate that with the decal.
Yeah, perhaps that could be something that we, the chair and I met with business groups. We met with Upper Montclair and Montclair Center representatives. Perhaps that's something we could work with those groups to incorporate.
Well, in New York, we have street signs that
The chain,
are different
right.
color,
Mhm.
Right.
identifying the historic districts. So that's something you could work with.
Yeah,
the town
Bloomfield's
council and-
got new street signs that you can actually see.
yeah. Okay, so that's number 6, and I am working on a designation of a Nelson House that I haven't finished yet, so that's one thing that I want to finish, individual home. So,
Okay, so add that as 7.
yeah,
Do you have an address for the property?
I'll send
Oh,
it to you.
okay.
Any other? No? Okay, then, before Mr. Karasik comes up, I just want to remind everybody that May is Preservation Month. Our meeting in May has been moved a week later, so it's May 30th. And the nomination form is on the website. We've got a few that are being considered now. I would urge everybody on the commission within the next 2 weeks to go on the website. It's very easy to print and then send it to Graham. Okay?
It's a fillable PDF, so you can type right
Right,
into the document.
very, very easy. And then our next meeting will have
The awards.
the awards, yeah,
So the nomination and
The nomination, the deadline for nominations is April 30th, which is Tuesday of next week.
Are we limiting the, did I s- no?
Well, we have a committee that then looks at,
Oh, looks
Yeah.
at what
Mhm.
Right.
we send in.
so
Yeah,
last
but
year
we have previously awarded multiple recipients in
Right.
the category. So.
yeah, and last year I think we awarded 5.
Was Applegate's ever acknowledged as a historic building in Montclair? Applegate Farms?
I believe it's identified in the master plan element.
Yeah.
as a-
I mean, is that something that could be nominated or something like that? I mean, is that, like, if I filled out the form?
No, but this is the awards.
There's
for
different
Right,
categories.
Bricks and
I'm
mortar,
sorry, you're right.
preservation service, or
Mhm.
preservationist of the year.
Right, something that, yeah.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Okay.
All
definitely
right,
building
so
room.
please, this is a great PR for this commission. Okay, I think that's all the business that we have to deal with. So, Mr. Krasik, everybody's got a
Okay.
copy of the...
You'll have a copy of what I distributed, which says memorandum on top. Now, I know you're just getting it tonight, so I don't expect anyone to have read it. What I'd like to do is give you an update on the demolition review ordinance, and then just go through the points in the memo, which is just 2 pages. And then you'll be able, at,
Wait, just,
Were they passed around, or?
wait.
I gave them to the chair.
Yes, yes, hold
Oh, I
on.
need one. Oh, thank you.
Does everyone have one now? Okay.
And so I thought we'd go through the points in the memo, which basically summarizes what's in the proposed ordinance. The council just received this on Tuesday, hadn't read it or seen it before, so they haven't discussed it or taken any action. So you're right in the ground floor on this, which I know has been asked for in the past. But more than on the ground floor, the Historic Preservation Commission's at the center of the decision-making on this particular issue, which is total demolition of historic structures. So, the council, as you know, was disturbed, or, at least, and so was this commission, I guess, and many people, about the sudden demolition of the 2 properties up on Lloyd Road and Undercliff. Those demolitions were done with permits and legally and according to, in compliance with all regulations that existed at the time. And I think that led to a desire to have some regulations in place which could require things like that to be, demolitions like that to be reviewed carefully and, if warranted, prevented. So this ordinance is not an ordinance, although it has some of the elements of the ordinance that was repealed in 2012, which we had on the books, which was a demolition review ordinance. You weren't on this commission, obviously, then, so you didn't know. But however, that ordinance, along with other ordinances in most other towns that have any demolition review, always permit, in the end, the demolition as long as the applicant has followed all the procedures, which are usually burdensome and take time and everything. But if all's done right, they can demolish. This ordinance doesn't do that. This ordinance, in the end, if the decision is no demolition, then the person will have to go to court. So, okay. So what this adds is, there's a few amendments to existing parts in order to bring it in, parts of the historic preservation section of the code to bring it in line, but most of it is a entirely new section. And what's been done in this section is all the review criteria for demolitions which exist now in connection with the certificate of appropriateness and anything else relating to demolition has been moved into this section. So this is sort of a one section about demolitions, at least total demolitions. Okay, number 1, if you look at the memo, number 1 is scope. What we've done is we're creating a term historic structure, which includes everything that's been designated as landmark by anybody, essentially, it's federal, state, local. Anything that's in a historic district, federal, state, or local, not just the local as the current law provides. And then we go to the master plan, and essentially anything in those study districts and historic districts and designated by the, what was that report back when?
Historic preservation plan.
Yeah, anything that's in the master plan historic preservation element, which includes
Preservation Montclair study.
right, preservation. That's what I was trying to remember. Preservation Montclair study.
Right.
So we've calculated this is somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 properties fit into this category. So, if anyone, that's the scope in terms of the area of what's being covered. But this ordinance, as Part 2 says, is about total demolition. It's really about tearing the thing down. It's not about, and we're gonna talk about that because I think it needs, the definition that's in the ordinance that you have, I think needs a little work, which I noted in bold there. Because I don't want to, I think that besides just the covering scenarios where the house is torn down to the ground, we have to be able to catch things where two walls are left standing, and catch things where perhaps a whole section of a house is destroyed, the rest of the house still there. So I think so I want you to look at that definition. Not right now, and we don't have to discuss it now, but as you read the ordinance, look at the definition of total demolition, because that's what triggers this process.
So the question is what defines the scope of partial demolition?
Well, I mean, look, you think about it. Right now, partial demolition is pretty broad. I mean, the current definition of demolition in our current ordinance is much broader than the one I want to use for this. But if we use that, then you would be reviewing virtually every time somebody pulls a permit for doing work on a house and takes off the porch or something like this, or replaces it, or does. It would trigger this heavy-duty review, which is not the idea. You still get the same, if a variance is being requested, you still have the same review that you would have currently. This is really aimed at stopping tear-downs. So it's not aimed as a general thing to deal with what you might call renovations, which inevitably or possibly include what would be fair to call partial demolition.
Now, we're not constrained by the MLUL Section 68 definition of total destruction where it comes to...
No, because that's if I'm not mistaken, isn't that's really for non-conforming uses and things. No, we're not constrained by that. In fact, the authority for this ordinance, which is sort of key, if you notice on page 3, there's a set of findings, purposes, which get added to the purposes that you already have in your ordinance. But all of this is coming from the authority to do what we're doing here is coming out of 111. And what 111 says, this is municipal land use law, section 111. That's the section that talks about reports on certain applications. And if the zoning ordinance designates and regulates historic sites or districts, which we do, the governing body shall by ordinance provide for referral of applications for issuance of permits pertaining to historic sites or properties in historic districts to the Historic Preservation Commission for a written report on the application of the zoning ordinance provisions concerning historic preservation to any of those aspects of the change proposed, which aspects were not determined by approval of an application for development. That's the Planning or Zoning Board. So what that translates to, and I've thought a lot about this, is that what the municipal land use law is giving this commission is the authority to rule up and down on applications for a permit that affects a historic structure but isn't passed upon by the Planning or Zoning Board. And would take the position that the Planning and Zoning Board regulates what's being built, not what's being torn down. So, in fact, it may be that when they authorize the building of a building on a property, in order to build that, a historic structure has to be torn down. But we're assuming jurisdiction for this commission over the decision whether that can be torn down. That's where the power comes from. So we're actually grounding this in the municipal land use law. And just recently, in fact, the end of last month, the SHPO came out with a ruling dealing with the authority of commissions under this provision. It wasn't about demolition, but essentially they said a permit, the permits referred to in 111 are not construction permits. They're not coming out of the construction official. They are separate permits, which can be authorized by ordinance. So in this case, what this ordinance or proposed ordinance does is give this commission the final say on whether a permit shall issue to demolish a historic structure, based upon a whole series of criteria, which are the same criteria you're used to seeing. So,
The minute somebody walks up to the planning department or construction official to file an application for demolition, in the past, recent past, we've been circumnavigated. What you're saying now is, based on what you're proposing, it immediately would trigger coming to us.
excuse me, the houses up on Undercliff and Lloyd Road would fall into one of those
Right, 'cause then
districts
the
that we're talking
potential-
about. There was a demolition at 10 Central Avenue last week, which also fell into historic district,
Frog Hollow,
right?
right.
Without permits, by the way. No one, so,
Yes, in the paper.
but those demolitions all would be subject to this review. Now, the idea is that, I mean, it's up to the commission, of course. The idea isn't to keep everything that's there. The idea is to evaluate, and when something is important, and that's your decision, you say, we won't give a permit. And the appeal from here is to the Board of Adjustment. Because what happens is, if you say no permit, then the zoning officer says no permit. Because the administrative officer is the one that actually has to sign off on the permit statutorily. And so the procedure would be, there'd be a procedure here, which I'll go over briefly with you. If the commission says no permit, then there can be an appeal to the Board of Adjustment. If the Board of Adjustment upholds you, then they have to go to court. There's no sort of procedure they can follow to be able to demolish as of right, which is pretty much how every other ordinance is written around the state, with the exception of New Jersey City's figured out a way, because through their administrative process. And Princeton is very strong, has a very strong ordinance, but Princeton's ordinance is I was thinking of seeing how much we could use of it, but it's really designed to preserve things, I mean, everything, because it covers their historic, downtown historic districts where the houses are all 200-300 years old. In any case, the way this particular ordinance would work is, what? Yeah, I outlined the procedure, so we'll just go through it
Ira, this
quickly.
includes the commercial historic districts.
What?
This would include all the residential
Yes,
and
yes.
commercial historic districts.
This does not
Says something
differentiate
number
between
one.
residential and commercial. It makes a historic structure, see, a historic structure has to be identifiable. So if a person buys a house or a building, they have to be able to know whether or not it's a historic structure within the meaning of this. Therefore, the ordinance points out that not only defines where these are, but says that every single property that fits that description has to get annotated at the assessor's office. And there's also has to be a list at the planning department. Now, Grandma's already made the list. So that way, if somebody's buying a house or wants to do something, there's a list right there, so that they can't claim that they didn't know anything about this. The issue of people who currently own places where this would be applied to, that might be something somebody could argue, that this happened after they bought their house and they didn't notice it. But it couldn't be argued by somebody who's subsequently coming. And I don't know how that argument would come out about existing property owners, but we're not going to go into that here at this point.
But
So-
can I just, how would people that are thinking about buying property, historic property in Montclair, how would they know beforehand?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, our office fields calls from realtors all the time, asking if the property is designated as historic, and we advise them
Okay.
that it's identified in the master plan, and if they seek a variance, they'll have to come to the HPC, but this would be an additional advisory point that we would inform them. It's also subject to
So you
demolition
send out
review.
an official letter to prospective
It's typically by
buyers?
phone. We don't send a letter. The real estate agents call and ask questions. And
So it's more informal?
sure, but we
Okay.
do provide that information. if
Does it
planned.
make, the only problem is, in that case, is that you're relying upon the real estate broker transferring that information to the prospective buyer.
Yeah, but if you're a buyer.
People
you
have
to do your due
lawyers.
diligence.
Exactly.
We're talking about annotating the property record cards
Right.
Right.
Which is now
and
going
having a
forward.
list that's available
Right.
and putting it online.
Right.
Yeah,
It already
that's
is
good.
online in
So
the form of the internet.
if somebody, I mean,
Right,
listen, there's only so much, there's only two hands to
Right.
hold
Right.
for
It's the
people.
same thing if like you buy a house and, you check to see what the zoning is. And,
Right.
my house is 5 feet, too close to the street. So every time I do something, I'm going to get a variance. You do that during the due diligence period. This is the same exact thing.
Got it.
Okay, so the procedure would learn something. If you look on page 2 of the memo, number 4, procedure, all applications to building department for building or demolition permits are referred to zoning officer now. That's the way it goes. The zoning officer determines that the work involves partial or total demolition of a historic structure. And I say partial because partial also triggers issues, although that's not what we're really going after here. The permit application is referred to the HPO. The HPO is a position that we had until it was repealed in 2012. It's Historic Preservation Officer, which can be Graham, it can be Richard, it can be a consultant hired, but somebody who has the authority to be able to review these permit applications and report to the commission. Now, there's a bypass procedure, which I call a low-impact procedure, by which if the HPO thinks that, hey, this is really not any problem, it's not affecting historic any, they, with the concurrence of the chairperson of this commission, which took them somewhere else, can approve that application and send it along to get a permit. We're trying to really weed out things that really you have no interest in at all. Anything else, if the HPO feels that there is a real, it does affect historic property, or if the two can't, or if the HPO doesn't feel that way, but the chairperson of the commission does, then it has to go through the process, and the rest of the process, which we'll talk about. So there is a bypass here to try to get rid of or weed out unnecessary work. Okay, so all applications referred to HPC by planning or zoning boards and through the referral process that might result or would result in total demolition of a historic structure shall, in addition to any other review, be referred also to the HPO. So we're funneling into the HPO all total demolitions, whether they're coming through development applications to the boards or through just permit applications. Like in the case of the Undercliff and Lloyd Road, those were permit applications. They went in for demolition permits and got them. Under this, those applications would be forwarded by the zoning officer to the HPO for historic consideration because those structures fit the definition of historic structure.
What about,
Okay, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask you said in your last statement, anything that involves total demolition goes through this procedure, but it doesn't, where does partial demolition fall into this procedure?
Well, I just, it doesn't really go, this procedure is total demolition. I just meant that partial demolition applications get referred because they might be subject, if they're not going to a board, then they're C of A issues. They're excuse me, through the certificate of appropriateness process. But that's for, I'm not trying to work around you. This really was written about total demolition. I think I left the word partial in there because I knew partial demolitions also had to be looked at by the officer, but that's not what this procedure is about.
Here's an example of a particular property in Montclair that I can recall where the entire structure was demolished except for the foundation, and then they built upon the existing foundation.
That's why I've asked you to look at the definition of total demolition, so that we can come up with a definition that catches situations like that. That's when I said a couple of walls remaining, or foundation remaining, or something like that.
Can't use words like substantial and, you know.
Well, remember, we're trying to accomplish a purpose, so we're going to figure out
That's what you
what's
guys are
good.
there
I mean,
for.
the idea is to word it so that it accomplishes the purpose we're looking for, not to try to catch everything in sight,
Right.
but to, not be able to somebody to claim, well, it's not a total demolition because I left the chimney there and I built a new house around it.
So can you talk about how Lackawanna would fit into this? I mean,
Well, let's
it's not
finish
gonna-
this, and then,
So,
Could we say something like, upon review by the historic preservation officer who determines that demolition is such that there's no historic fabric left to this structure, or something like that?
well, we can't, but that's what
you want us to do
That's what I
between
want
now
you to
and
think
next
about.
month.
I want
So
you to
we
take
should-
it and think about
Right.
that, and
So we
think
should
about.
think about total demolition and also partial demolition.
Yeah,
and
I
what
mean,
it
this is
would-
what they're talking, we're trying to make something practical that actually deals with this particular problem,
How
not
about,
solve everything.
I was just thinking if elements of a structure are removed such that you can't identify it as an architectural style anymore. So if dormers were removed, something that really identifies it as.
We already have that as part of our definition of, and when the facade's taken off or things like that. That's in the definition of demolition that's already in the ordinance. And the question is, how much of that do we want to carry into total? And it's a good point, but I just don't want to resolve it right now.
It's kind of like a design patent.
Yeah. So, okay, all these applications are then funneled to the HPO, who, assuming that doesn't get bypassed or shunted off through the what I call low impact procedure, the next thing that happens is a report's prepared for the commission. And the commission holds a public hearing and decides whether to approve the application or not, based upon all of those criteria which you'll find in the ordinance, which weren't new. They're ones I just pulled from the criteria we have listed for certificate of appropriateness and stuff. So all the criteria in here are ones you're familiar with. They're just moved into this particular section. Okay, so it says, report findings and recommendations to the HPC as to whether the structure merits preservation. If the, then there's the E, part E is the bypass. F is a time frame. You have to work within 45 days. It has to happen quickly. You can't jerk around with this. Otherwise, you run up against the deadlines in the permitting process. Then if the HPC, if you go to G, if the HPC approves, that's you, total demolition, or fails to act within 45 days, the zoning officer can approve the permit. You've approved it. If the HPC disapproves the total demolition, zoning officer denies permit. It's far as you're concerned, end of story. Then, if the applicant wants to appeal, the appeal, and this is statutory, this isn't my idea, it's a statutory appeal from an administrative officer's decision, goes to the Board of Adjustment. But it's here, puts in that the HPC, through one or more designees, if you're reading this ordinance, is required to appear at the hearing at the zoning officer and defend its decision. Explain the reasons for its decision. Who's putting the person to the trouble of appealing, and you're going to go down there and advocate for whatever, which I didn't think was a problem, by the way. And that's basically the procedure that you'll find in the ordinance in the next bunch of pages. And you should read it together with the current ordinance, because sometimes it refers to it, but mostly it stands on its own. I think the comments from this commission will be very important, because this commission has the burden of doing this. The council definitely wants something which can stop a demolition when it's warranted. Again, I don't think they're anxious to just see the idea isn't just to automatically stop every old house that might get torn down, or to prevent new houses from being built. The idea is to maintain, the reason why you want to maintain historic structures. If you look at again, one other thing you could look at, I put, in 142.1, I added purposes, which I mentioned to you earlier. You certainly could refine those or even add more purposes. I mean, what we're looking for is to try to get a very, telling a property owner that they can't demolish their house is a serious thing. We're doing the best to find a way to have it upheld in court, basically. That's why the tie-in to municipal land use law and that section 111 is important. I also would work on the planning and zoning boards to put right in their resolutions that they, to make a condition that if there's a demolition, that it has to be approved here, so that they've actually disclaimed that they had anything to do with ruling on it. That way, they meet the condition that they haven't ruled on the aspect. I think it's logical that they haven't anyway, but we'll do our best to lard it up.
Well, you're trying to protect, basically the planning board or the Board of Adjustment shouldn't have that authority, and they should be able to just push it to us, and they could have clean hands.
Well, the theory is really that they shouldn't have any authority to tell what can be torn down on a piece of property. Their authority is to tell what can be built on.
But you're saying you're vesting the authority in the HPC.
To pass on whether a historic structure can be torn down.
And what is an historic structure?
Historic structure is
Right.
anything that meets that broad category.
Right.
That's how it's written now.
And the 45-day, for example, G, I believe it was, is that a statutory requirement? Any application has to be responded to within 40?
In this permit things, yes.
Well, our meetings are once a month, so that effectively might put us in a situation where we have potentially, what?
There might have to be some serious speeding up, and if there's any way to extend that, I will, but that's what I found.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that it might mean there's no if this really gets cooking and you have applications, you might need special meetings.
Right.
I don't know.
It would be helpful to have some form of contingency for an extension.
That would only be on consent. In other words, you can always extend it if the applicant consents, but I wouldn't count on it.
May I ask, who was the historic preservation officer in the past? What was it? I'm just curious as to, and with that, if we hired somebody, a contractor, would that come out of our budget? Whose
yeah,
budget
right,
does it
the,
come
the
out of?
applicant pays the costs.
Barton was the.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Barton.
The applicant pays the cost of the review.
So the applicant pays the salary of the historic preservation?
There'll be
Not
a
a
supplementary,
salary.
it's kind of a per diem basis.
It's like,
Okay.
it's like an escrow. We use it,
Oh,
in fact, we
okay.
can set up an escrow.
An escrow, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the idea isn't to create a new position to hire somebody, it's to either designate somebody on staff, which is less likely, or use outside consultants on a per review basis,
Mhm.
which is a more likely approach. You know, many times, a lot of structures that are called, that fall within these districts and everything really have no, what you would call historic value. I mean, everything has some value, but,
Like an
so,
old garage.
that's why we have the bypass, because there's so many structures that really are just by accident that they're within this district, fit that description.
It creates a filter, it allows us to,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you don't want to be held in hearings.
Now, what if
on
it's a secondary structure? Let's say it's a carriage house.
It says a building, so if it's a carriage house, that stands on its own. And you're gonna tear down a carriage house, that's a total demolition.
What if it's like a garden structure? Let's say Van Vleck, somebody on the,
Is it mean separate from the house?
yes.
If it's separate from the house, then it stands on its own. If it's historic, it's historic. If not, not.
So any structure within the zone, not
Yeah.
just the primary
Within-
residence.
Within any of these.
Yeah,
zones.
it's not primary residence.
Right.
It's- If there's an outhouse there that's historic,
Right.
it could fall.
And that's why the
within-
provision to allow for expedited review, should the HPO say be acceptable of demolition in consultation with the chair, that some of those minor structures can move through more quickly.
Now, this has been through a lot of revisions that I've done, but it's been really, other than Graham looking at it and Janice a little bit, no one else looked at it.
Mhm.
So don't get, you might find things, I don't know, what's this like or anything. That's the reason why it's here.
So
Because it's
do-
here, this isn't just an exercise.
Mhm.
We're really looking for input.
So do you want us to email our comments to you, or wait, or hold off until our next meeting?
No, I think we can discuss them at the next meeting, but you could email me comments, you can mark it up and scan it, you can make copy and write, I don't care what form it comes in.
But before the next meeting, before May 30th?
It would be more productive if you
Right,
did.
okay.
And I just want to recommend one thing to the commission as you consider this before the next meeting is to, the ordinance, as Mr. Krasik mentioned, is to really address the total demolition. And the total demolition definition is something that he wants you all to kind of consider in looking at this. One thing that I just want to recommend that you all also evaluate is the requirements for a certificate of appropriateness, because those there's a list of modifications there that are subject to a C of A provision. So I think it's important to parse out that this section of the ordinance would address that total demolition side of things. The C of A is really to address other modifications to dwellings that may be more along the lines of partial demolition. And that's why it's important for the commission to continue to work forward in doing additional landmark nominations and designations of additional local sites, because then those modifications open up to additional review by the HPC. So I think it's important to parse those two things out, and really focus that this is with respect to tear downs and total demolition.
That's
There is a
really
whole
good.
separate review process for other modifications, siding, a new porch, those kinds of things to historic structures. So
One thing
just
I should-
use the existing ordinance, like Ira said.
One thing
in
I
your
should say
evaluation.
too is, the current scope of the certificate of appropriateness, if I'm not mistaken, and stop if I'm wrong, is that it covers any house in a locally designated historic district.
Correct.
Or any house that's been locally designated as a landmark.
Correct.
This ordinance changes that to it's not as big a group as is going to hit for total demolition. Total demolition is 5,000, but it will be any house in a local, state, or federal historic district expands that, and any house designated by anybody, local, state, or federal. So it does it does expand the scope of what's covered by C of A. And
With
what
respect to the total demolition.
what I didn't want to do is expand the scope of C of A to include the whole ball of wax as the total demolition does, because that way you'd be meeting 3 times a week, essentially. There's so much work being done on those 5,000 properties that would then fall within the meaning of C of A. So we're still keeping the C of A fairly compact, but it's expanded. I expanded it out from the very compact now to at least include these other districts. If you have any comment on that, you can make it. That's not really what this ordinance is really intended to deal with, but I had to modify that section, so I didn't like that too narrow.
So would the C of A then include potential historic
No.
districts? No, okay.
Not the way it's, mind you, this is,
But
I'm
it
talking
can.
about the way it's written, and you might want it to, but I don't think, I'm
Wait,
trying.
doesn't it include the things that have been identified in a master plan as?
It does with respect to the total demolition provision.
Oh.
Not,
Total demolition covers the whole.
Right, that's
Okay.
here.
Right.
but why not apply it, the issue of the C of A?
Because it would mean that there would be a review in enormous number. You would require a C of A in a lot of, every time somebody goes in for a building permit to fix their deck or paint their porch or something like this. They're not in a designated district, and they're not a designated landmark. They just fit into this broader category. They would have to come here for a C of A. And we don't think, we being staff now, doesn't think that that's either practical or wise.
And the designation
You could think
process.
otherwise.
And the designation process is a collaborative process with the property owner, community members in a district, or the individual property owner, so they're advised of the impacts that the designation will have and the positive impact that historic preservation brings to their property. So it's a collaborative process between the HPC and those property owners in designating their properties as individual landmarks, so they're more aware of the designation and what that brings with it.
I
So.
mean, the council's very concerned about these, I believe. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I mean, they certainly have expressed real concern about the demolitions as we've been seeing. If you start getting into really modifying the whole structure of how historic preservation works and is enforced, I think you're going to get a much more diffuse opinion, and it's going to require much longer time for the council to review it. So I'm trying to, even though this is 13 pages long, it's aimed at that particular, if you want to call it evil, of total demolition. Okay?
Great.
Okay,
Thanks.
yeah, thank you.
That made me think about number 4 on our goals and objectives. We also talked this year about extending the town center historic district along Bloomfield Avenue to the east. Can we add that to the list of potential historic districts? I just feel like there's tremendous development
Right,
pressure
right.
along these
Yeah, we can,
commercial
sure.
East or
corridors.
west? You're talking about the
West.
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 Yeah, I think that should be an additional separate
It
item.
should be a separate
Because
bullet.
number 4 speaks specifically
Right.
to the grant funding
Yeah.
for the survey, but we can add.
Right.
Oh, by the way, what I will send you is, because I sent it to the council as well, a copy of the ordinance that was repealed in 2012.
Oh, that would be
Okay,
great
good.
to
Yeah,
have.
could you,
Yeah,
you'll email
Yeah,
that to us?
I'll email it to you.
all right, that would be great. Thank you, Ira.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think that concludes
Mm-hmm.
everything. Just be aware that our next meeting is May 30th, a week past our normal meeting.
Not bad.
So, may I have a motion?
to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Probably won't make that next meeting.
That's